Ho! Devlog 2! Let's get into it. The name of my game and its setting is Memoirium. It's a mixture of three words: memoir, memoriam, and aquarium. To sum it up briefly and roughly, it is about taking a step back to account for one's life from a distance. I hope that the game's mechanics reflect these themes I'm attempting to tackle. In this video, I will talk about and do my best to explain my game's gameplay loop. The loop is essentially what players will be doing over and over again. For example, in a battle royale, the loop would be something like loot, run, fight, then repeat. My loop consists of three parts as well, which I will be splitting the video into: explore, fight, and level up. But a better way to put it would be dream, die, and decorate. First, let's talk about dream, or the setting that the player will be exploring. Memoirium is a realm of dreams, or I could say it exists in the endless expanse of the dreamscape. I wanted it to serve as a reflection of my own journey from childhood to adulthood. My personal story is nothing particularly noteworthy or unique, but since it is my own story, I'm the only one able to tell it. Memoirium is split into three regions: Whimsland, the city of Vera, and Finalitum. Making the setting quite flexible means I don't have to stick to one genre in terms of aesthetics and design. In one place I can have knights and lords, while in another I can have lasers, guns, and spaceships. Whimsland. It is the land of wonder, and it is full of joy and the uninhibited imagination of childhood. But also present are the uncontrollable emotions of fear and anger. Next, the city of Vera is an area brimming with truths and lies. The journey from being a teenager to a young adult is no smooth or easy path. And lastly, the largest and most vast region is Finalitum, the nation of all. Here everything comes together as adulthood is reached, and everything is a mess. I could further expound on the areas within the regions themselves, but I might do that in another video, or just keep it to myself so I won't spoil the game. Let us move on to the die portion of this video, which would be the combat, or the gameplay mechanics. I've used the rule of 3 quite generously when designing and developing the game. It serves to keep things relatively simple and manageable for me. First off, there are only 3 stats that the player can improve. These are lucidity, potency, and resilience. Potency affects how much damage the player can deal to others, while resilience reduces all incoming damage and status amounts. More on that in a bit. Typically, in a game like this, there would be 2 important resource bars: health and stamina. Health, of course, is how much damage that the player can take before they die, and stamina is spent on actions such as attacking and dodging. What I did, and I'm hoping it's a good idea, is I've put the 2 resources together and called it lucidity. So once the player's lucidity is emptied, they will wake up. Air quotes. I'll do my best to explain how this works. The lucidity bar starts at 0 and fills up, so it acts like a reverse stamina bar. Getting hit while your lucidity is below the threshold, which right now is 80% of your maximum lucidity, will only deal chip damage, which reduces your maximum by a small amount. Meanwhile, if you take a hit while your lucidity is above this threshold, it means you will take the full amount of damage reduced by your resilience. To understand lucidity better, I should mention the 3 main actions that the player can take. These are attacking, dodging, and parrying. Attacking doesn't increase lucidity unless you actually hit something, so this means you can actually keep attacking when your lucidity is full. But hitting while you're above your threshold won't make the enemy stagger, which is important for interrupting their actions. Dodging is simple and just costs lucidity, so it can't be done while your lucidity is full. Finally, parrying costs nothing and is vital because a successful parry reduces your current lucidity. Another important thing to note is that the heal rate, or rate by which lucidity empties or decreases, is dictated by your current maximum lucidity. So the less maximum lucidity you have, then the slower your recovery rate will be. Still related to combat, there are only 3 statuses or elements in the game. Again, I still stick to the rule of 3. These are heat, cold, and shock. Each of these is paired with an action. So heat is to attacking, cold is to dodging, and shock is to parrying. It's important to remember these pairs or relationships because attacking isn't the only way to deal damage. Above everything's resource bar, their vulnerability will be shown. Attacking an enemy that is vulnerable to heat will deal increased damage and increase its heat status. So this means that if something is vulnerable to cold, it will encourage players to dodge into their attacks instead of away. And parrying an enemy vulnerable to shock will do the same thing. It'll deal damage to them while also increasing their shock status. At maximum or full heat, the lucidity bar will slowly increase. Being cold will slow the entity down, and shock will simply reduce the damage dealt to others. I wanted to present more options for dealing damage other than attacking, but it's actually not necessary to use the vulnerability mechanic, but it does make encounters much easier. Besides the 3 core actions, there are also spells and powers the player can use, but they also share the same properties of heat, attacking, cold, dodging, shock, and parrying. For the player's weapons, there are only 3 choices: the spear, the sword, or the staff. This makes my life easier, because it means I can continue to refine these 3 weapons instead of having dozens of choices for the player and even more work for me to do. Having a less than modern look also helps me feel less bad about having a wonky animation, like this for example, walking around. I've also thought about adding a strafe, but then if I did, I would have to make one for everything that moved. So I don't think that's worth the time or the trouble. The player will also be collecting masks, which will have varied effects except for the starting mask. Right now, besides the default masks, I've only created one other, which gives the player a source of light. I'm also considering different armor sets and weapon sets that can change the player's stats or abilities. Finally, the last part of the gameplay loop, the decorating portion, or the leveling up and improving. All experience points will be converted into memory fragments once they've reached the required amount, which is dependent on the current level of the player. They won't level up right away, they have to go back to their room or home to decorate. This serves as the hub for the player to relax, unwind, and I hope have some reflection. To actually level up, a memory fragment must be placed into an item to remember it. Then the player will choose which stat to increase, either lucidity, potency, or resilience. After that, the player is free to write anything they please on the item. Each one will have a filler description to serve as an example or inspiration. There will be many room items to pick up, as well as different textures to choose from for the floor, wall, and ceiling. Collecting prime reminiscences in Memoirium is the first main goal of the player once they are introduced into the world. These are great sources of power that major bosses in each region wield. Once collected, the player will unlock incredible abilities of their choosing. But more importantly, it will give the player access to do new stuff in their home, such as making new rooms or adding companions. Other than that, I still have to figure it out. There is a lot more I'd love to expound upon, but this video is already long enough and it took me a good chunk of time to complete. My top priority, of course, is to continue working on my game. Once I've finished with its foundation, I can actually start the hardest part, which is creating the entire world. And that's going to take a lot of learning and practice. So I'd like to say once again, peace out.